This week on NWP, this episode of Nerds Without Pants is rated M for comic mischief, cartoon violence, partial nudity, and complete apathy.
Jimmy's in the back with a pocket of high. If you listen close, you can hear him cry. Oh, Lord, heaven knows we belong way down below. Sing it.
Hello everyone and welcome to Nerds Without Pants episode 54. I am Julian and I'm joined as always by Patrick.
I'm ready.
And Angelo.
Don't censor me.
And special guest, friend of the show joining us once again from movies.com, guttersandpanels.com, and the Giant Size podcast. We have John Gholson.
Hi.
That was a pretty good intro.
I keep racking them up.
It's kind of like back when we had Rob on the show, and it's like every episode he had like another credit that we had to add to his intro because he was just all over the internet.
Yeah, you didn't say that I was a member of the Austin Film Critics Association, so if you could, please start over.
I'll pencil that in for next time.
Okay, thank you.
So, this episode is actually going to be brought to you by Mr. Angelo Grant. We're going to be talking about a subject that he brought to the table, which is going to be all about the ESRB, which is the Video Games Ratings Board, if you're not savvy. But, of course, before we get into that, we're going to talk about some Consumption Junction, kind of a modified version this week. You'll figure out why in a little bit. But, John, it's been, a couple months since you've been on. What have you been up to in the interim?
Let me think. My day job moved offices, so we're in swanky East Austin tech-style digs. Instead of the kind of business park thing we were in.
The gentrified part of Austin.
Yeah, it's fancy pants over here. And then as far as consumption goes, I've been playing a lot of Spider-Man Unlimited, which is the new iOS, kind of like a Temple Runner clone. Like one of those games where you're like running forward, and picking up things. And it's funny because it's actually the second superhero theme one I played. DC has one that's Batman and Flash. And it seemed to me like somebody probably thought, let's make a Flash game, but then went, maybe Flash won't sell. So threw Batman in there as well, because I'm like, why is Batman running?
That's kind of the whole DC Universe comic book line as well. It's like, this isn't going to sell well, let's throw Batman in it.
Yeah, so I played Batman and Flash Hero Run is the name of it. I played that one first. And it was the first time I'd ever played any of those like Temple Run clones. And I didn't like it. And I was kind of like, man, how do you screw up a Flash game so bad? I felt like the graphics weren't particularly good, so you couldn't see stuff until you were like running into it. So you couldn't tell which lane it was in or whether you should jump or slide underneath it, that sort of thing. And I got to say, it's just a poor quality game because I'm playing the heck out of Spider-Man Unlimited, which is like a freemium game where the Sinister Six, there's been like this accident and they've torn open a portal that's letting all these different alternate versions of the Sinister Six come through the portal. And so Spider-Man is also using the portal to basically bring all these Spider-Men from different reality into the 616 universe to fight the Sinister Six. So you basically use these vials that are sort of like your coins to buy new Spider-Men, and the Spider-Men all have different looks and abilities and that sort of thing. Like I have just the regular Marvel Universe one. I have the Marvel Manga-verse one from back like 15 years ago. I have Spider-Man Noir as one of mine. I have one where he's in a Fantastic Four costume with no shoes and a paper bag on his head.
Oh, that one's a classic.
Yeah. So it's fun. It's a lot of fun. It's a good Spider-Man game, and the graphics on the iPhone are really, really good. Like, it's a great looking game. But I've been playing a lot of that lately.
is he constantly web swinging or running or both?
No, it's running and web swinging. There'll be gaps between the buildings that will require you to swing, and there's like hoops that you want to try to get through to build your combos up, and there's like power-ups in the air, and there's enemies in the air as well. So basically you tap and hold the swing, and when you release your finger from the screen, he drops basically from the web, and then when you tap again, he shoots another web, and if you hold it down, it continues to swing. So you can kind of control how high he goes or how low he goes by removing your finger. The controls are really slick. I've really liked it.
Yeah, it sounds like there's like more to it than I mean. I played Jetpack Joyride quite a bit, and I tried Punch Quest, but I didn't really get into that one as much. But it sunk a pretty good amount of time into Jetpack, and it sounds like there's a little more going on there.
Yeah.
Do you think that like Temple Run clones are actually related to Crash Bandicoot way in the past?
Well,
maybe a little.
Like you're not forced forward. You still have to like move Crash forward.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And these games, you can't stop. Like there's no way for me to put on the brakes. Like you're in perpetual motion. So.
And they tend to all be, at least the ones that I've played, like the levels are always like randomly generated.
Yeah, and that's the same here too. Except for the mission levels. The mission levels, there's like free roam levels that cause you to level up because the mission levels have level caps on them. So it's like you can't do certain missions until you're certain levels. So you have to go do the randomly generated ones to basically build up your levels so that you can do the regular missions. And then there's like event missions. Right now the event is like the spider armor. The recent one that was like the red and gold one with the weird arms in the back.
Oh yeah.
It was like I downloaded the game while it was already in progress. And it was like a 2-day mission or something like that, or 3-day mission. And basically you just keep playing that over and over and over until you earn. And if you achieve the ultimate goal, then you earn that spider armor. Otherwise, you earn basically calls to the portal to bring over like a more common Spider-Man. There's like common, uncommon and rare. It's freemium, but I haven't really spent any money on it. Basically, you can play it about 5 times every, I would say, like hour and a half or so. You get about 5 lives, and then you kind of have to wait for the thing to reset.
That makes me think about something like, because you work in the app business, so to speak. So you're very up on the whole like freemium stuff and all the different like pay models. So when you're playing like a freemium game and stuff like that, I hate that word, a free to play game. Do you ever just like throw in some money just as like kind of a tip type thing?
I did on Spider-Man because they had a sale that was like 90% off on there's like these purple crystals are what you can use to basically continue, so that if you're having a good run on a level and you die, you can keep going from where you left off. The purple crystals are also used for ranking up, because you can level up to 10, and when you hit 10, you stop, and you have to rank up to continue to level up. And the purple crystals are used to rank up. And so there was like a purple crystal sale where they were 90% off. So it was like 99 cents for like 50 or something like that. And I looked at the regular prices and I was like, I would never, ever, ever spend the money they want me to spend on the regular price crystals. So I spent the $1. There's some games that I do spend the money on, and there's other games I don't. I spend the money on my Simpsons game a little bit sometimes. Part of it is I get incentives here at work where we get like Amazon gift certificates. And so I'll use those to get Amazon coins, and then use the Amazon coins in the Simpsons games to like buy buildings and things like that. But then I played, there's a Ghostbusters iOS game that came out maybe 2 years ago, and that was free to play. And I was never, not once, tempted to spend a dime on that game. There was no reason for me to. Like, the game was completely robust and playable without anything, which, as far as the gameplay goes, it's cool because you're playing a relatively fun phone game that doesn't cost you anything. But on the other hand, nobody's making any money off of it. But I may be different in that regard, as in terms of like what I'll spend it on and what I won't. If somebody has a good game, I know on the flip side the amount of manpower and the things like that go into it. So if I play it for a considerable amount of time, I may spend up to about $5 in a game just to kind of, it's like I'm buying it after the fact. It is sort of a thank you buy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And but a lot of times in the games, I'm not necessarily like, it's a weird like, not a catch-22. I don't know how to describe it. It's sort of like, if it's good enough to play for free, I'm almost not compelled to spend the money. There's very few games, if it forces me to want to spend the money too soon, I'm more likely to not play it. And so it creates like a weird situation where it's like, I am sort of like saying thank you to the game when I do it. Because there's stuff I've played for months without spending a dime, and then there's other stuff that I played that I thought was high quality, but right away was asking me for money, and it was sort of like, nah, you know.
It's definitely a fine line, and I haven't been playing a lot of like iOS stuff lately because my phone it's an iPhone 4, so it is now like, obsolete pretty much, and I'm gonna have to upgrade here pretty soon. But I mean, when I was playing games pretty hot and heavy, it was more like Tiny Tower was a perfect example of a game that I felt I could just keep on playing without putting a penny in because it just worked so well. But I was having so much fun with it that I was like, well, I'll just go ahead and throw in some money.
Yeah, Tiny Tower gets to be a pain in the butt when you start having to deal with the elevator. That's about the only thing that I was ever compelled to spend money on in that game was the elevator being so slow once you get to a certain height,
Yeah.
And really going like, God, I got to spend the money to get a faster elevator because this sucks just holding down and like watching this elevator pass, 70 stories of fake shopping. So.
Yeah, I played that one for hours, and then when they released the Death Star one for Star Wars, I played it for about an hour, and I was like, no, I can't do this again.
That was almost exactly what happened to me. I used to have an iPad and played the heck out of an iPad, and I have this Kindle now, and they don't have the original one for Kindle, but they do have the Star Wars one.
Sorry, John, what are you reading on Kindle?
Oh, I'm not really reading anything on Kindle. Well, I mean, it depends. You mean like, am I in the middle of a book right now? I do some comiXology stuff on Kindle, and I get comps from some comic publishers as well, so I'll download them to read on the Kindle. And occasionally, like, I just bought the big SPX comiXology bundle, which was like $10 for like 85 indie comics. And I'll do like humble bundles on occasion. I did the Boom humble bundle that came out recently that had like Planet of the Apes and RoboCop and stuff like that in it. And I think that was like $10 for like $200 worth of trade paperbacks or something.
Holy
like that.
crap!
Yeah, it was an insane sale. You have to. Those humble bundle sales on comics are incredible. They've done Image ones, they've done Boom ones, they've done Dynamite ones, and it's always like hundreds of dollars worth of books for like nothing. So yeah, I'll do that on there. But mostly I use it for video. My work doesn't require me, but it's more convenient for me to have two monitors while I'm working. And so the Kindle ends up being a third screen. So I'll watch like WWE Network on it, or Hulu, or Netflix or whatever. So
I find it a little bit, well, not a little bit, like extremely vulgar to like read print on digital formats. I like my musty books and my comics and my magazines and stuff like that. But I was thinking, because, obviously, well, actually it was after helping you move your comics, John, and seeing the futility that was trying to extricate 2,000 comics from your collection because you were just far too stubborn of a collector. But I was thinking that I could switch over to digital for comics if they came out with a reader that actually folded open like a book, where it had like two screens. Mm-hmm. Like that would be the format that I could probably do it in, because and you've talked about this before, where the comics are not drawn in such a way that they're conducive to like a like a single screen.
Yeah, most
tablet.
are not. Yeah, most are not. I would say like there's some like Marvel's Infinite line that they have for the digital stuff. They make that specifically as a digital reading experience. That stuff is really good. But yeah, most of it is not. Most of it is still, people are doing page by page compositions. I'm actually a big advocate of a hardware that I think would be really, really good for somebody like Marvel, especially that has like Marvel Unlimited, which would be essentially a dedicated reader and a dedicated store, but sold to like the toy market. So basically, for let's say I'm 9, 10, 11 years old, and at Walmart or Target or whatever, there's a like a Spider-Man digital reader or a Captain America digital reader or like an Avengers digital reader, where basically it's sort of a tablet that's themed to the the designs on the tablet are themed to the character, and it comes loaded with X amount of books already in there ready to go, and and then allows you a subscription to Marvel Unlimited, or allows you to buy books through a store that's only available in that, and create a new format and enter like almost like entering comics into like a weird place between being a digital good and being like a toy. And I could see something like that doing really, really well. Like a sort of a dedicated comic reader for kids, like marketed towards kids. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that'd be great. I mean, and I'd be all for it again if it was like, and maybe the technology isn't cheap enough yet, but I really do feel like I need like a fold out 2-screen type thing for like those big splash panels and stuff like that.
And I think that's where something like this comes in, because you're not using it for anything else. You're not necessarily using it to browse. You're not using it to like, basically if all you're doing is saying this is a device that reads comics and it connects to this special comic store, and that's it.
Right.
And I think then you're not talking about like, crazy processors or anything like that. You're just creating essentially a viewer and a portal to import the stuff that you're viewing. So
that would be very cool.
We can't have like a pad where we can reshape the actual picture and put it on our wall if we want to.
I mean, that technology is in the works. I mean, they've got like that kind of like conductive paint type stuff where you can actually just like paint a screen onto your wall, or roll out a screen.
That would be awesome if we could just, put our comic book on the wall for a big splash page for a little while, then take it back down and keep reading it after we minimize it back to a regular normal page.
Yeah. I had actually seen something like that. It was on like Discovery Channel a couple years ago, where it was like a very customizable screen where it was like on the kitchen counter, and you could expand it and shrink it as you wanted. It was very much like the way that you would enlarge something on an iOS device or something like that. So, crazy stuff.
Someday.
John, speaking of comics, I understand that you have some words for Patrick.
Yes, Patrick.
From the last episode.
I will have you know, sir, that Aqua Man is popular enough to carry 2 monthly titles. He has not only Aqua Man, but Aqua Man and the Others that come out every single month.
Oh, yeah. That's new. You got me.
How dare you besmirch the Prince of Atlantis?
Yeah, I mean, he's still no Batman or Superman who has at least one title coming out every week.
He's no Batman? His parents are dead. Oh, he's no Superman? He's the last of his kind. Now what you got, Patrick?
John Gholson spitting mad truth about Aquaman.
Not talking about content, just about sales quality.
Oh, you like kid sidekicks? He's got one of those too, and he rides a seahorse.
Does he really? Oh my god!
No, I don't think Aqualad rides a seahorse anymore, but he did.
That would be great if he did.
But what would I rather ride? A car, a black car, or would I rather ride a seahorse? I'd rather ride a seahorse. I can ride a black car anytime. I've never ridden a giant seahorse.
I'm not a big Aquaman fan, but when we were at your house, like doing the comics, and you had the Batman, the Brave, and the Bold on, I really enjoyed the Aquaman episodes that you were playing.
Outstanding.
They played him a lot like classic Thor, where he's just kind of a fish out of water, no pun intended. Like clearly a different
it's really dull on that show. That's my only problem with it. Like, I don't mind it. He's funny, but he's so dim-witted. And he's never, it's like all the other Brave and the Bold characterizations are pretty close. They're within the neighborhood of the character, but Brave and the Bold's Aquaman is such a dummy. And that's the only thing that I'm kind of like, well, I've never seen Aquaman portrayed as stupid as he is on that show. But I know a lot of people that felt the same way, that didn't really like him at all or think he was cool until until they saw Brave and the Bold. And honestly, like with Jason Momoa playing him, that's actually the character I can see Jason Momoa playing, is not the one from like the DC universe proper, but like the bearded dumb guy from Brave and the Bold.
How would you sell Aquaman to someone like me whose only exposure to him has been
Super Friends?
Yeah, pretty much.
If I was going to tell you like to start somewhere, I would say it would be the Jeff Johns New 52 run. I think the first arc is really good. It's a really good superhero book. And I think that's a perfectly fine jumping in point, and it actually gets kind of meta at times and addresses his place in the DC universe from people who are like, all you do is talk to fish, right? Like you can't even do this or that or the other thing. So why are you even in the Justice League? Like there's even conversations he has with people like that in that first arc. And it's in a way that's not too much of an in joke, but it's still there. And I think that's probably the best if you were going to look into it. As far as like what kind of character he is, I mean, it's sort of like there are some DC characters to me that you either think are cool or you don't, and it's almost hard to sell somebody on them. You know what I mean? Like it's like everybody I think has their favorites because there's like Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman, and then outside of that, it's like there are guys that like the Flash, there are guys that like Green Lantern. And then you start getting more obscure, and you're like, well, there's guys that like Firestorm a lot, and guys that like Blue Beetle a lot, and guys that like Batgirl a lot. And it's like, if you were to ask somebody, like, give me the hard sell on Batgirl, what makes Batgirl cool? It's hard for me to think of anything to say other than, imagine if Batman were nice and a girl. And it's sort of like, well, that doesn't make me want to read it, but that's exactly what it is. You know what I mean? And it's like, that's not really like enticing. But that's what the book is. And it's like Aquaman's kind of the same way. Like I could go like, well, imagine a guy is pissed off as Batman, but he lives in the sea. And you would be like, how is that a hard sell on that character? You know, but that's...
I honestly don't think I've ever changed my character opinion on anybody in the DC universe. Like I've always sort of disliked Superman because, you know, he's almost all-powerful, but then again, it would be cooler to fly than to ride a seahorse, even though I do like Aquaman more than Superman.
Yeah, give that first Jeff Johns arc a try. I've seen the trade pretty cheap some places, and it's good. I really liked it when it started. It got a little Jeff Johns got stretched thin, and the comic started to slow down some, where you'd buy an issue and like not really anything would happen. But that kind of didn't start happening until the second arc. And it turned out to be because they were trying to set up this other monthly. But that first arc is pretty good. He deals with like a bunch of sea monsters that are like eating people. So
I also liked when he was fighting Wonder Woman and like the universe was changing because of it and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think for me, as someone who grew up on Marvel and then converted to DC, because I pretty much only read DC these days, I still have a really hard time getting into the larger universe because I really feel that a lot of the designs are very stuck in the 60s. Like, I look at Martian Manhunter, I'm like, no, just, you're wearing suspenders. And I don't, like, there's a lot of characters that are in the DC universe where their costumes are just very flashy and kind of clashy to me. I don't really know how to articulate it well. I just know that, like, I see a lot of the characters, I'm like, no, he looks dumb. Like the original Green Lantern is a perfect example. Like Alan Scott Green Lantern. Like, I just think he looks dumb.
I just think that I would describe them as archetypal rather than Marvel characters who have, you know, more nuance to each of their personalities. Even there's nuance to the DC personalities, but they always sort of stick to the same drive. And for Marvel, it sort of seems to waver a lot more. Maybe that's just me, John.
Well, the thing is, with the Marvel characters, they were created. They weren't necessarily. A lot of them have like derivative powers, and so the DC ones were created to be whatever their power was. So, like, you know, Aquaman is created to be like a guy that can live underwater, and the Flash is created as like a guy that can run fast. You know what I mean? So everybody's centered around what their sort of like their ability sheet. You know what I mean? It's like here's what this character could do, here's their stats, here's the gadgets they use, here's all this and that. And that's all rooted, you know, in the golden age, and then even going into the silver age, it's rooted into sort of the habits of the kids, and you see it carry over. I mean, it's kind of weird, and I've never really thought about this comparison before, but like Pokemon is really popular, and it's kind of the same sort of thing where everybody has their favorite Pokemon, but it's not based on personality. It's all based on power set. Like, I like the fire one, And that's basically like what a lot of these DC characters are. It's like you had this universe filled with characters, and it was all defined by, this is the one that's nuclear. This is the one with cat claws, And when the Marvel Universe launched, it wasn't centered around what are their powers. It was centered around who are they when their masks are off. So even the Fantastic Four or Spider-Man, it was all very much who are these guys outside of what their abilities are. And DC has had to play catch up in that regard because, the Marvel age really started in the mid-'60s. DC had already been publishing comics for, 30, 35 years at that point. So they had a lot of catch up to do. And even then, it wasn't really until the late 70s and into the 80s before they started to try to give these alter egos more relatable human characteristics and personalities. And so a lot of the stuff has kind of been shoehorned in and is still, in the grand scheme of comic publishing, it's still kind of new. You know what I mean?
That's a very fair point.
I just learned a lot.
As happens when John Gholson is on the show.
Oh, thank you.
John, anything else you've been up to before we move on?
Oh, no. No, I've just been trying to make I got Fantastic Fest starting up this week, and I've been, my move lasted like 2 months, and I'm still playing catch up on all my comics, and that's been pretty much it that I can think of.
Would you like to enlighten? Cause, I mean, you mentioned it on like your first appearance on Nerds Without Pants, but that was before we had actual listeners. Would you like to enlighten people as to what Fantastic Fest is?
Oh yeah, it's a week-long film festival here in Austin. It's sort of all the films are left of center, so a lot of people think of it as like a horror and sci-fi fest, but it's actually like they play all kinds of movies, but all of the movies are like not normal. So like they may play a romantic comedy, but it's going to be kind of left of center and weird. They've action movies, same way, crime movies, whatever. They're all going to be different from the norm. And yeah, that runs a week. And since I'm writing for movies.com, I get to cover it. I think one of the first things I'm doing is actually, during the summer, I've been doing the stripped reviews, the comic book reviews of movies. And it looks like the first thing I'm going to be doing for Fantastic Fest is a stripped review of Tusk, the Kevin Smith horror film. I'll be doing a comic style review of that. I don't know if Patrick and Angelo have seen those. I know you have, Julian.
I've heard of Tusk.
No, the stripped.
No.
Yeah, we talked about on your last episode, and hopefully they checked them out. I put the link in the show notes for your Planet of the Apes review, I believe.
Yeah, I wish I was doing them for like all kinds of movies, but they have me pretty much doing them for just the tentpole movies, and it's like 1 page, 9-panel grid comic strip reviews of stuff.
I really loved your Guardians of the Galaxy stripped review.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I remember those now. You got to do more. Maybe you could just start up your own blog or something.
Yeah, I think if I wasn't so darn busy, I definitely would, because I'd like to do them for more than just comic book movies. I guess the last one I did, I just checked because I couldn't remember. The last one I did was Turtles. So.
Oh yeah, that one was good too.
Yeah, it's been a while since that film. So.
Yeah, not long enough. Patrick, what have you gotten up to since our last episode?
I wasn't going to start with games because I haven't played that many games, but since we haven't talked about video games on the video game website podcast, I guess I'll start with that.
We talked about Spider-Man iOS.
Yeah, that's true. But we had like a couple of free games this month for PS Plus that I didn't really like at first. Like I didn't like the idea of them, I guess. But at least for PS4, I tried out Sports Friends, and it's been like an awesome party game. Like the past 2 weekends in a row, I guess because of the games, like they're so like phallic in some ways. And then like the second weekend, like the friends of mine came back and were like, "Can we play that game again?" It was really cool. It's really funny because in one of the games you actually have this like large pole that you like wave in the air and it's like floppy.
Yeah, I can get the phallic thing from that. Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's like a ball in the middle like of the screen, and people have to smack the ball with the floppy stick. and like get it to the other side, and there's like a target on the other side, but people smack it back and forth, and like there's just these big sticks flopping around.
And this is all with the move controls, right?
Well, you can. We did it all with like just the PS4 controller.
Oh, okay.
I'm sure that the actual like game would be cooler if it had the move control, but it's a lot of 2D stuff, so you don't really need it. It's not like sorry, I don't think. And there's like, really competitive games. If you start to like actually like them at first, you'll be like, oh, this is just fun because you've never heard of these games before. But within a half hour to 45 minutes, it's just like, any other game you were competing with your friends with. Like, there's this game called Bari Bari Ball, which is like essentially there's two people on each team or one person on each team jumping up and trying to throw it to the right or to the left, depending on which side you're on, in order to get it in the other person's like water and like fall to the bottom of the side of the screen in order to get points. And it's first to 3 wins. So like really short competitive stuff like that ends up being pretty fun, I think.
Nice.
So I'm actually glad I didn't pay for it, but glad that I have it. Perfect plus game if you ask me.
Yeah, and not a lot of people paid for it anyway, so you're in good company because I heard it didn't sell well at all when it finally came out. I think that's probably why they put it on PS Plus so quickly.
Is that one that was kind of talked about at like E3 or something? Like people were sort of excited about it there?
Yeah, I mean it's been around for years. I think it started not too long after the Move controller came out for PS3, and because there's a lot of different games that kind of came together to make this one, but they all started separately. And the big one that most people talked about was the Johann Sebastian Joust, and that's the one where I think if I could be wrong, Patrick, like correct me if I'm wrong, but like you get like Move controllers and you're balancing them, and people are trying to knock them down so they can do whatever they want to like basically knock you down and knock the controllers down, and it becomes like a very physical game. Like you're really not using the screen so much as it's kind of keeping score while you're trying to keep from dropping these controllers or something like that.
Yeah, we liked that game. The only problem is like we're pretty physical people already, and a lot of my closer friends are size off guys, and like if we hit each other, it starts to turn real. So we don't want to like mess things up, and we don't want to, accidentally break something. So we only played that a few times, but like we were using the whole room and like jumping around and stuff. And you could actually use the PS4 controller for that too. It's just like you can't tilt it to the sides or shake it violently. If you shake it really, then like you're out. But yeah, that's a really fun game if you have like the right area to play it in. A lot of expensive furniture and weird angles around though, and, like people wanting to jump on the couch or over it and like make it like fall down because of it. Then it becomes a little bit harder. In theory, it's awesome though.
Well, yeah, people got to watch out with you and alcohol and your Irish coming out too, because you'll start to fight.
Yeah, and speaking of, my Irishness and the alcohol and wanting to fight, I went to Riot Fest last weekend, and that was like a 3-day festival in like a park that's near my place in Chicago called Humboldt Park, which used to be like a really bad neighborhood, but now it's like up and coming and sort of hipstery. But there were like a bunch of big bands that were there, including the Dropkick Murphys.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and they were on Sunday, and I had already thought, I had enough fun. On Friday, Offspring were killer. They played Smash all the way through, and then after that, I thought they'd be done, and then they came back like a minute later and played like all the rest of their big hits that I hadn't listened to in like 15 years or whatever, and it was just like hearing them again for the first time, like when Pretty Fly for a White Guy, I'm like, I know this, I'm like, God, when did I hear that last? So, Offspring was great. It was great to hear all of those songs that I'd not heard in a while. But pretty good, but they had like technical failures for a second. Like they had such bright lights and loud music going on that the entire stage went black for about a minute or so. But when they came back, they were like, let's go guys, get up. Like, I don't know if you know Wayne Coyne, but he's like the lead singer, and he's kind of like preachy in a way, like where everybody needs to be involved and stuff like that, and he'll slow down the song until he feels like everybody's singing it and stuff, like, and everybody's feeling good vibes. So that was cool because the National was a little bit late, and they played after the Flaming Lips. So the Flaming Lips were just given word that they could keep playing. They played for like 15 extra minutes, and they were like just like doing wonders with the crowd. And they ended with like Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, which they like never play as far as I know. That was the 4th time I saw them, so I was really happy to have recorded that too.
Nice. I was gonna say it's nice to hear a band that like actually goes above and beyond instead of just like, nope, we're out, peace.
Yeah. They started a chant, play all night. Like they wanted to keep going, and it was unfortunate because there's some law in like Chicago that you can't go past certain times if you don't get zone city or something, and I don't think they can even go past 10:30 if they want to.
Oh, wow.
Because Lollapalooza never does, and that's like way bigger. They went to 10, which is like seriously early considering stuff like Bonnaroo goes till 6 a.m. Before we get on to this 4th row for Dropkick Murphys, and it was like the best mosh pit I've ever been in because I was forced to be in it, and the entire crowd, it seemed like, was a mosh pit. Like I got pushed forward probably 25 rows on accident just because I couldn't move back, and somehow I landed up on the 4th row. That was great. The Cure was surprisingly decent. I don't really like them, and like I actually kind of liked their live show. I stayed for 45 minutes out of 2 hours or so. They had easily the longest show, and I don't know why, because people like the Flaming Lips didn't get to play all their songs, but I'm sure the Cure is better to some people. And finally, I went to a haunted house there, so I went to my first haunted house of the year. That was really cool, except it was cheap. I need to go to a better one.
Anything else you've been up to?
Well, I went to this like essay reading last night, and I got a really cool book called 10th of December by George Saunders. It's like best books of the New York Times book review last year. It's short stories, so if you don't have time to read a whole book, perfect for you, because George Saunders is literally, everybody says, like the best short story of our time. And so far, through a couple stories, it's been pretty awesome. One story is just about like a dad dressing up a pole like a Festivus pole, except he like changes it like as the seasons go by and like carries it with him and stuff, and then he dies all in the course of one page, and they move out, and then the next people put it in the garbage. It's like a lot about loss and disenfranchised people, and arguably the best. He is the best, so definitely check out 10th of December. And I found another book called Wildwood, which is written by the singer-songwriter of The Decemberists, and it's like turned into like a Chronicles story, kind of like Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings, I would actually compare it to more, where there's like a fantastical city inside of a forest in Portland, and then there's like this place called Wildwood that is like trying to fight between good and evil, and there's like forces that are trying to take over, stuff like that. So I'm really excited to read that with my kids in school after school or whenever I can fit it in. So that's going to be fun. And finally, back to games, I need your help on something, which is debating on whether or not to get Destiny.
Oh.
Like, get mediocre scores.
I really can't help you there right now, Patrick, because I've only played 20 minutes of it. I bought it, and I popped it in like day one, and I got to play the intro level and then got booted from the server, as I expected. And then I was like, I've got more Diablo that I need to do, and that's all I've been doing is Diablo.
Going on the opinions of a couple of people that I really trust, it depends on how much you like Borderlands, because as much as they try to dress it up, that's basically what it is. And the AI, you know how you're not getting Halo-level AI with the enemies you're facing. It's just not there, which I don't understand, because this is Bungie we're talking about. They just got through making Halo games. They're arguably making Halo Online, but the encounters just aren't as interesting as they were in Halo. So I guess if you like a Halo-style Borderlands game that's got an MMO twist to it. Oh, and also the story is just throwaway. So All the missions are go here, push a button, or go here and kill guys. Like there's basically 2 or 3 variants. So I mean, and if you like that sort of thing, like Borderlands was fun when you played it with other people, but as soon as you played it like by yourself, you're like, wow, this is not fun. So I guess that's as close as I can really get to a recommendation, since I don't have the game, but like I said, I've talked to a few people that firsthand that have played it and
yeah, you're right
have
about
come
that.
away kind of mad on it.
Real quick, before we get into what me and Angelo have on deck, John, real quick, you grew up in East Texas.
Yes, I did.
How did you survive being as big a geek as you are? Like,
cried a lot. I wondered if anyone would ever like me. No, I mean, I'm just kidding. No, that probably did shed a lot of tears. I mean, it was kind of weird because, like, my high school experience was like, the classes were about 20 people. So, like, there were, I think, 16 graduating seniors in my high school class. The school was like 300 people, K through 12, and I had moved from Houston. And my first year there, I felt like a real outsider. It felt really weird, and people would trip me in the hall and call me names and slap books out of my hand and that kind of stuff. And then, this is so weird, but it's true. And it doesn't, I know this doesn't make any sense, but I swear it's true. Over the summer from my junior to senior year, Nirvana broke out. And when I came back to school for my senior year, suddenly I was like super cool. Cause it was like a school full of like rednecks mostly. I have some friends and stuff that weren't, but it was a mostly kind of rednecky school. And when I came back, for my senior year, it was like, I don't know, I just seemed like way more accepted, and the stuff I thought was cool was suddenly cool. The toughest part was like consuming the media, I guess, because it was hard to find comics, and I would drive like 45 minutes away to Nacogdoches, Texas to get comics and stuff like that. But you'd find people, I mean, that liked the same stuff you did. There's a couple, and they're the people I made friends with, and I'm still friends with them today. So that's how my friendships were forged over the other kids in my class that also read comic books or whatever, that would go to the convenience store and buy them and stuff like that. So I don't know. I don't know if that answers your question. It was tough though. I mean, it was, I think, but you get out of it and you find out that everybody feels different. Even the people playing sports and stuff like that. I guess everybody feels, like they're the only one that feels the way they do or whatever when they're in high school. So.
Well, yeah, but I think I can feel your plight after, going to visit my girlfriend in Atlanta, Texas, where she lives, and instantly feeling like I did not belong because I did not like hunting or shooting or fishing or footy ball or, talking about Republicans. I don't know. Like I feel very out of place, and I usually feel out of place just in general, like wherever I am, but especially there. Like I saw a sign somewhere that said video games for sale, but that's all it said, and I was like, man, it would suck being a gamer here. Like I don't know what you do. I mean, all there is Walmart, and you're not going to get hardly any. Like they're going to, especially in a town like that, I doubt they're going to be getting like Diablo 3, for example, or South Park: Stick of Truth. Like they're probably getting like the big titles, and that's it. And I guess Amazon would be the saving grace now, but growing up, like for you, I pour one out for you, John, because man.
So like not being from your area, is that the part of Texas where there's like nothing going on? Like it's just kind of dull.
It's called the Big Thicket where I lived, and it's all pine trees. Okay. It's kind of like Panhandle, Florida. One of you guys is from Florida, right?
No, Angela went to Florida.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Panhandle of Florida is very similar to that part of Texas. It's just basically all trees, and it's about 3 hours north of Houston and kind of in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because it just seems weird. Because if I was in the middle of nowhere, that's probably all I would do. Because I mean, at least around here, I can go a few places and do some things, and weekends aren't really. There's never me wondering, okay, what am I going to do this weekend? There's always something going on. It's very rare that I actually have a weekend to sit home and do nothing and play video games all day. But it's like, it sounds like that should be the norm out there.
I made that stuff for myself. Like I carved it out. I actually saw more movies then than I do now. I would drive, I would keep an ear to the ground as far as like what was playing where, and I would drive out of town, sometimes drive all the way down to Houston to see movies in the Art House Theater. As far as comics go, we were driving 45 minutes to Nacogdoches, then we started driving an hour and a half every 2 weeks to Bryan College Station to get our comics there. So I just did it. The sheer force of will, like it's the stuff I was interested in. So I had to kind of chase it and really, go after it in a different way than I do now, which is, to now living in Austin, it's as easy as like running out and picking up a carton of milk or whatever if I want to grab something. So,
yeah.
Or if I want to see, a movie or whatever. It's also at my fingertips. So.
Especially since you now are literally like a block away from your comic book store.
Yeah.
Let the headlines wait. Armies hesitate. I can deal with fate, but not the little things. Armageddon may arrive any day. I can't get away from the little things. With the silent chaos and the bucket of tears, I look at the sunlight and I feel no.
But I mean, I think you did that because you were passionate about your comics, and I would say gamers are passionate people.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't you, Angelo?
Yeah.
And I think we would be remiss to not at least touch on GamerGate for a little bit.
Yeah.
But I was so in such a wonderful little bubble because I think I didn't realize it at the time, but I guess I was there on the internet for like the beginning of it, but then I went away for a week, and when I came back, like basically everybody was at each other's throats, and I was like, I don't know what's going on. I don't want to know what's going on. I'm just going to go over here and play Diablo and screw you guys. So I really stayed far away from it. So Angelo, I think you need to enlighten us a little bit before we can talk about this stuff.
Well, the whole thing kind of started going down while I was still in Florida. I mean, this has been going on for like a month now, if not more. But basically, what started GamerGate as a hashtag, although this isn't really the source of all the conflict, was when it came to light. Well, okay, hold on. What's that?
The Cliff Notes version, if you please.
Yeah, okay. There's a game designer named Zoe Quinn who's rather upset ex-boyfriend decided they would publish a blog chronicling her alleged by him repeated times of cheating on him with other guys, two of which happened to be in the business of reporting on video games. And this is all, I mean, I checked the blog out and I got maybe, I don't know, I didn't even get halfway through it. I got a few and I was like, this is a pissed off, venting, childish dude, who really doesn't like, and maybe some of this happened or whatever, but the whole way it was even laid out was just like, I don't want to read this. I just didn't want to read it.
I felt the same way. I thought about that far as well.
But people did get this, and they did get the important, well, air quotes, important. Part of it was that she had sexual relationships with people whose job it is to review video games. Most notably at Kotaku, there was one guy there specifically who I don't remember his name because for some reason her name is the one that keeps coming up in all this, even though she's not the one bound by journalistic integrity, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Anyway, so it has kept going, and it's snowballed basically, and it's gotten bigger and bigger. And over the course of 4 weeks, there have been journalists acting like little kids saying, you guys need to grow up, and then these guys acting like even more juvenile, and there's been doxings, and there's been hackings, and there's been people saying that people are doxing themselves and then publishing stuff online, and there's been people saying other people are drama queens, and then there's people on the other side saying people on the other side are drama queens, and it's, make it stop. I wrote a piece for Pixelbit a year, almost to the day from when this thing broke, that literally said, why is everybody acting like children? This would be great stuff to discuss if we could do it like adults. And here it is a year later, and it's finally blown up. And I almost feel vindicated, but just not in the way I want it to be. Because it was almost like I was warning people or saying, like, look, can we just discuss this like adults? Can we just have these fantastic discussions that everybody wants to have about video games, but do it in a way that's respectful towards each other? And apparently the answer is a very, very loud, angry no. So that's GamerGate in a nutshell, I guess. One of the things that happened that kind of got on my nerves was I think I may have mentioned Jen Frank on this podcast before. If I haven't, I'm mentioning her now. I've kind of been a fan of hers from the 1UP days, and talked to her on Twitter a few times. She was extremely nice, extremely friendly, even though we differed. Like, we had about 50% common ground beliefs and 50% stuff that we just completely disagreed on, but we could still talk to each other. And I had, like, this idea that, you know, hey, maybe everybody could talk like this, and even if we end up disagreeing, at least we have a better appreciation of where the other people stand on certain things, or just agree not to discuss them, right? And when this whole thing went down, she was actually friends with Zoe. She published a piece basically more or less defending her and sticking up for her. I think that's a good way to put it. The problem is when the whole discussion is about people having relationships with other people and using that. Basically the GamerGate side of this is saying that people are using their relationships with journalists, and journalists are using their relationships with indie game developers or game developers to further their agenda / boost voices of people with similar views / help each other out, that sort of thing. And then she went out and published this thing basically defending her friend. People jumped all over it. Like, you're her friend. You shouldn't have a say in this. This is outrageous. This is scandal. And while I would say that maybe the decision, and I'm choosing my words carefully here, and I hope people understand what I'm trying to say, while I think her decision of publishing that article may have been unwise, she was not wrong. I don't think anything she said was wrong. I don't think how she did it was wrong. One of the biggest things is she wrote a disclaimer in the article, went to put it in there, and it appeared in The Guardian, which is a UK publication. Said disclosing her relationship with Zoe Quinn, and The Guardian said, no, you don't need to put that in here. We actually want you to take it out. It disrupts the flow of the article. We don't think it's necessary. So they removed it. And then people got on her for not disclosing that, and she said, I discussed this with The Guardian, and they said not to. And as a result, she's like, I want nothing to do with this anymore. I'm not writing about video games ever again. And she seems really sincere about it. So I just said a lot.
Well, I guess I'd like to, just say my piece, and it's a lot of things, and I think this whole thing is a culmination of years of different little things that have kind of just come to the head. And what I've noticed is that I see this widening gap between video game fans who are and I would call them the hardcore gamers, the enthusiasts who follow the industry really closely, and the people who write about video games. And what I feel is that it's kind of there's a little bit of jealousy, maybe a bit of jealousy between enthusiast gamers and the people writing about them. And I think part of that is because the internet made it to where it really kind of took that separation away. I mean, back in the days of EGM, which is where I come from, of really appreciating people that write about video games, there was that wall there because they were in a completely different world, where now it's anybody can start up a blog and write about video games, and if you're intelligent enough when you write, people will listen to you. And so there's not, there's no longer this super separation between writers and gamers. So I think there's that.
I can definitely appreciate that because, again, back earlier when I was following people and reading up on things, I can't tell you how many times I've discovered something on Twitter only to be intensely disappointed by what I found. There was one, I'm not going to mention a journalist because I don't want to throw anybody else under the bus in this thing, but there was a journalist that I was like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to follow this person, find out what they're really like, and I did, and I was like, wow, I want nothing to do with them. And Stephen King was another one. Oh my gosh, every time that guy tweets, I'm like, man, you need to not do this. You need to stop.
Right, and so I think definitely Twitter is a big thing about that, and also just like, I think, well, there's a couple things. Like, there's no such thing as video game journalists. There's never been such a thing as video game journalists. Like, people who write about video games are entertainment writers. They're gamers like you and me. They're really passionate about it, and they were lucky enough to get a job writing about it, and bully for them. But at the end of the day, like, the way, especially now, like, the video game industry is so incestuous because companies are so dependent on publishers and PR to get the information that they report on, well, quote unquote report on, write about. It's not like back in the days of EGM where there were actually people trying to pump people for information and put that in their gossip column, or, take a screenshot off of a screen of Batman for NES because the company told them not to, and that was the cover of their magazine that issue. Like, that stuff is gone. You know what I mean? And it doesn't really bother me. Like, I understand it. Like, so, like, to me, it's like, so what if Zoe Quinn slept with a guy who writes about video games? Let's just put aside the fact that she made a free-to-play game that not a lot of people talked about anyway. Up until, like, maybe Giant Bomb started covering, because Patrick Klepek got really into that game. That was, like, the really first time that, like, she hit the scene, and, as far as we know, she wasn't sleeping with him, so I don't really know how much that benefits her anyway. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't really matter. Like, for me, it's like, I love video games. I like to hear intelligent people talk about video games. The problem for me is that the voices that I enjoyed reading, about video games are no longer writing about video games. People like Shane Bettenhausen and Jennifer Sau and Crispin Boyer, like, they're gone. Like, they're either making video games or they're completely out. And so what we have left is, like, a few people from the old days, like Jeff Gerstmann from Giant Bomb. I mean, he's been covering games since the early 90s. But for the most part, it's just a bunch of, bloggers straight out of college and people doing YouTube videos these days. So I'm not really sweating, how their integrity. Like, it's more of, if I find somebody that I like and I kind of like listening to them talk about video games or write about video games, okay, I'm making my own decisions here. I'm not counting on these people to tell me how to spend my money. I don't think that's ever really been game writers' jobs. Maybe way back in the 90s, but it's really. I just want to talk about games, guys. Like, can I talk about how awesome Diablo 3 is some more? Like, I don't really need to get into this whole, like, like us versus them type of thing. And that's really the sad part about this is I understand that a lot of it is rooted, at least on the journalist side, they're coming from the, like, sexism side of it, because, I mean, there were some terrible things said about Zoe Quinn. I mean, she's been called everything that you can possibly call a woman. And that's gross, and I hate that, and I understand that it's a problem. But I also think that that's kind of the internet, and I think you probably find that stuff kind of all over, probably more in video games, just because the audience skews a little bit younger than politics. But I'm sure that people say the same type of stuff about, Sarah Palin or Greta Van Susteren or, whoever. Like, that's just, unfortunately, the way things are these days. And I also think that really a big problem with all of this is just the whole 24-hour coverage.
Yeah, it's just a sad double standard. It's, why women get mad at us sometimes, because we don't treat ourselves that way, but a lot of guys will lash out at women who are sleeping with more people than they are. Jealous. B, they don't get that woman, and they want her. And they live vicariously through that person, and they don't like the fact that that person is getting it all and they're getting nothing.
I don't think that's what this is about now, though, and that's the thing. Is that's like looking at the match that started the forest fire. I mean, or that's not even a good example. I mean, like this match was dropped on a pool of gasoline that existed long before it got sparked. I think a lot of it has to do with the attitude that people are coming across with when they publish articles online. And I'm talking about the journalist side, or journalist air quote side. Or should I even do that? I don't know. I probably just offended somebody. Whatever.
I mean, I just said there's no such thing as game journalists, so...
Right. And then, but they're all bloggers, but then if you call them bloggers, they get offended too. It's like, what? So...
I mean, I know you don't like him, but like, you know, Arthur Geese and Anthony Gallegos on Rebel FM, like, they will say repeatedly, you know, I'm not a games journalist. You know, like, I think Anthony Gallegos used to call himself, enthusiast press.
Right.
You know, because,
that's neither here nor there. I mean, the problem is that so many of these articles crawling across discussing these issues have done so in just such a demeaning, condescending, and aggressive way that it's pissing people off. And that's where I see that's what I see has fueled this, even if it was the silly Zoe Quinn thing that started it. Because you know, okay, big deal. So and even if that was a problem, I believe either I've heard two sides of this, and I'm not even sure which one is true because I don't know how deep I want to dig into this cesspool. But either the person that she ended up being with never actually published anything about the game, or they pulled it immediately after this whole thing came to light. And they even have a policy right now that says that their reviewers are not allowed. This is Kotaku saying their reviewers are no longer allowed to fund game projects like on Patreon and things like that, or Patreon or however it's called.
Which I find weird because I don't see the distinction between that and the same writers going out and buying a video game, because they all buy video games because they like video games.
I don't even know anymore.
You know? And actually, John, I mean, you know, you wrote a review about one of your close friends' movies, and I think that you handled it perfectly well. I mean, I don't think that there's, especially in entertainment writing, I don't think that there needs to be this, like, oh, well, I am so far removed from this scene that I can look at everything objectively, because it's not objective to begin with.
Yeah, and film critics didn't have to go through this growth spurt and maturity that needs to happen between their gamers and their relationship with the press. I've seen a lot of calls for people to be pure as the driven snow and without any kind of outside bias or previous taste in games, just review the game. You know what I mean? This kind of talk. And it's like, people still have taste. People still have personal taste. There's writers you read because you like what they see in the things that they talk about, whether that's games or movies or whatever. And everybody's personal integrity, in a weird kind of way, and this sounds weird, I mean, short of being criminal, is their own business. So if I read someone whose opinion I trust or I find interesting, if it's suspect, it doesn't change the fact that I find their opinion interesting. Does that make sense?
Totally.
Or for me, if I'm reviewing a film, if you're reading me, I assume that my relationship with you is because you find my voice interesting, not because you think I'm a paragon of virtue. And to me, the game industry needs to mature in that regard and realize that, yes, there are still human beings writing these articles. And I don't know if I don't know if it's the product of a digital product that people want a binary game sucks, game awesome, just tell me, you know, if they want that kind of a response. But I feel like, because I've actually, before this controversy, I have some friends that, you know, run game sites or write for game sites and things like that. And it's like, before this controversy, there was a couple years worth of controversy about rating numbers. Right. And how when people would give things a 7 still means it's good. But gamers would see that 7 and go, oh, that means it sucks. Or flame somebody and go, God damn it, this game's awesome, and you're an idiot because you didn't give it a 9 or a 10. Can't you see how good this game is? And you're hurting the game industry with your 7s. You know, that's such an immature way of thinking. The only place that pocket really exists in my field is Rotten Tomatoes. Because there are people who get really, really mad, and they watch that tomato meter, and when a film's at 90% and it gets that one negative review that brings it down to 89, that they're like, you're an idiot, you don't know what you're talking about, how dare you, it was 90% and you lowered it. And it's like, well, what like what does that even mean? Like,
why are you so invested?
Like, that's my thing with GamerGate that I don't understand is like, it's freaking video games, guys. Like, it's video games. You know what I mean? And it's like, you're going to do all this concerted effort to try to get the FBI involved, and we're going to shut her down, and we'll show her and all this. You'll show her what? You'll show her not to make games in her spare time? Or you'll show her what? Not to sleep with people that have the same interests as her? Like, what's the point of that?
I don't think, again, I just think that the problem here, like, yeah, people write reviews all the time about stuff like that, but what's the tone when they write it? I mean, you can write a game review in one of two ways. You can write it where you're coming across like you're genuinely interested in that and in the fans and in the product and how it plays, or you can do it and be a dick. And the problem is, a lot of times, I think, well, not a lot of times, but I think occasionally people use that as a platform to say, I feel this way about this game, and if you disagree with it, you're a misogynist or you're a whatever. And they'll like slap a label on somebody because they feel differently about them, and then people just get mad. And then they start looking for, well, how can I get this person in trouble? Well, how can I dig up dirt on them? And that's where they get to the kind of air quotes conspiracy stuff. And it's not because they really are interested in integrity or journalistic integrity. It's because I hate you for insulting me, and now I want to make you suffer. You know?
At least,
and I think if we could just take this, if we could do this whole be excellent to each other thing that we talked about maybe 20 years ago, that'd be great, guys. You know what I mean? That's what I think we need, and I think that's what'll prevent this from happening again. But nobody's going to listen, and it's going to escalate just like it did this time, and it's going to happen again because nobody cares.
We're going to
That's where I am.
The disconnect, I think, is I see, like in comics, this is what I see like in my blogging, and it's actually like part of the reason that I started mine is my comic blog is I was seeing reviews that maybe didn't have a good sense of history, but I was also seeing reviews that were guys getting comps that were giving like let's say a new issue of I don't know, just something average, just like X-Force or something, okay, would come out, and it would get 4 out of 5 stars or 9 out of 10 on Comic Book Resources. And I'm thinking, are you honestly telling me that this X-Force issue like 11 is a 9 out of 10? And what are you basing that on comic book history? Or are you basing that on it's a pretty good issue of X-Force? Do you know what I mean? And so like I was seeing these skewed numbers, and my deal is just like, you know what? Like, I don't read that. Like, it got to the point, it's like, I'm not going to read that. Like, I'm not going to read the opinion of somebody who would proclaim a work like that as near perfect. Either A, they're dumb, or B, they're influenced by the fact that they got to read it for free 2 weeks early. Okay? So I'm either not going to read them because they're dumb, or I'm not going to read them because they're bought. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, if we just gravitate towards the readers we want, don't read who we don't want to read. And I think that's a big part of kind of getting over that. I mean, as far as the misogyny stuff, it's really, really, really ugly. And it's a huge, huge part of subculture. And there's people that can't differentiate. So you have there's 3 groups, okay? There's regular folk. There's the actual misogynists. And then there's the easily confused. And what happens with the easily confused is they end up looking like the misogynists because they see the misogynists are jerks. They see the response to the jerks, and they think the response is to them. And there's like this huge swath of gamers that are in that middle easily confused part where it's like they're not talking about you. Like these guys going, hey, it's like the not all men hashtag. That guys came up with, like, not all men, and it's like, they're not talking about you, you idiot. Like, yeah, not all men. You're not the one they're talking about. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I actually posted the same kind of thing on Facebook. There was a guy who, like, diatribed about how they're not talking about all men when it's yes, all women. We're talking about women. Can you just take a step back for a second and let them speak?
Yeah. That's it, exactly. And I don't know. I mean, you guys. I don't mean to. You guys know this. We know this, and I know we're going to get into it later in the show. But you're also talking about a medium where the age range is so much wider. So for me, like in film criticism, I'm talking about like R-rated movies and art house stuff that like an 11-year-old boy is simply not interested in, like straight up. But you know what? You put Call of Duty in front of a 10-year-old and you put Call of Duty in front of a 40-year-old and you'll find two guys playing Call of Duty against each other. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so you're also dealing with something where the breadth of ages is so wide that it's like this crazy melting pot of different maturity levels where you have guys that are like, you have immature 40-year-olds leading the charge with like immature 11-year-olds that don't understand the consequences of their word and all this kind of stuff. And it's not like anything else I've ever seen. I mean, comics come kind of close, but even comics, I feel like the gap is a little narrow because kids aren't really reading comics. So all the immaturity you get in comics is actually from adults.
That's almost exactly why those review scores are so bogus for me in terms of gaming, because the age range is so large. You can't really give it, one rating for everybody. It sort of should, in an ideal world, should be divided up into like different sections of people and like geared towards those people. Like, will this kind of person like it? Will this kind of person like it? Now, I don't like look at reviews for that purpose. I sort of use reviews to justify my preconceived thought to buy a title. I sort of, at this point, know what I like and don't really have any more writers who I go to specifically. I just sort of like, go for a hodgepodge and see if like anybody says like something has an element that's not been seen in the game before or something like that. I do gravitate, I'll admit, toward writers that I already know for like the literary world, but for the gaming world, I think that's why scores are so important. But also the scores are important because of like bonuses that companies get, and I don't think it really should be like tailored to that. Although it is, a nice little bonus if they do get a 90% on Rotten Tomatoes. Like Destiny was supposed to get a $2.5 million bonus if it hit 90% in the first month on Metacritic, and it's not going to. So I could see like maybe people creating a bogus email or something, and then like creating a sign-in for Metacritic and being like really, really mad that like they're giving it bad reviews because damn, they would have gotten $2.5 million if people liked it a little more.
Yeah, well, we could almost do a whole other show about like the Metacritic and stuff like that. I mean, I really do feel like just, as the reviews editor that hasn't been doing many reviews, unfortunately, for Pixelbit, I mean, for me, a review it should never be, well, let me see if like so-and-so would like this or this type of person. Like, it should be, did the writer, like, what was the writer's feeling about that game? How did the writer like it? And then it's up to you to decide if you like the way the writer is talking about it, and maybe you read some of his other stuff or her other stuff, and you're like, okay, we kind of align, so I can take you seriously. Like, I can't tell you objectively that Hotline Miami is a piece of hot garbage. I can tell you personally, I thought Hotline Miami was a piece of hot garbage, but there are plenty of other people who love that game. I did not, and that's what my review said. Like, more power to you if that game is a 5 out of 5 for you. It was a 2 out of 5 for me, and I think that's how it should be.
But did you call for changes in the game to make it cater more toward your interests?
No, I just said I just said that it kind of grossed me out, and I really hated the music. I mean, and that stuff was never, even when that stuff was popular, like that type of music never appealed to me. So like that's a huge touchstone for people that love that game and didn't do a thing for me.
I thought it was just funny how like nobody else felt like that way, but then you had me play the game, and I was like, no, I kind of feel the same way you do about this. I thought that was hilarious, but I don't know. I really think that if people can walk away from an article, if you're writing an article to the general public, and half of the general public is walking away feeling like it's talking to them when it's not, like It's like the not all men hashtag again. You know, people had to go out of their way to explain that to people to calm them down because they were getting really upset. Like, no, this really isn't about you. This is about something else. Now that's something that happened on Twitter where you have a character limit. If you write an article and people come away from that article confused, thinking you're talking at them instead of you saying, you know, that this might not apply to you.
Well, yeah, in that case, I think that's a poorly written article, and the person reading it should say that's kind of a poorly written article, and then be about their day instead of
offended.
Well, yeah.
So that's not what people on the internet do when they're offended, and so the cycle continues.
Well, exactly. But, I've talked on this show a couple times about how I seriously dislike Phil Fish. Mm-hmm. Like the way that he has come across in public. And as such, I don't want to buy any of his game because that's all he's doing. But I have no need or desire to like do a tweet saying, "Hey, Phil Fish, I really hate your game, and I'm not going to pay for it," because there's nothing to be had for that. Now, and there's plenty of people who have said that to him, and I feel for him on that respect because there's no reason for that. It's like I can say on this forum, I don't really care for that guy. I'm not going to buy his game, and that's fine. But I'm not going to say like, oh, Phil Fish is like a piece of garbage, and I'm going to say it to his face, or, his hashtag or whatever, because that doesn't help anybody, and it's a waste of my time, and it also makes me look small.
Well, one of the things that happened in the course of this, I'm not sure how much longer we want to stay on this thing, I think we probably should wrap up soon.
Yeah.
Was I got put on a blacklist. I got put on a list of people to block on Twitter that got circulated around, and I don't even know how. I had to actually do some digging because I was like, how did this happen? I'm not one of the bad guys. I'm not a misogynist. I follow all sorts of people on my Twitter feed. Who did I tick off? And it turns out that one of the people at Polygon had followed me. I did not follow them. I did not tweet at them. They followed me, didn't like what I was tweeting, and then blocked me. And then when this block list got started, submitted me as one of the people that should be blocked by it. Not because I was harassing people, but because I said something that they didn't like on my feed. And if you look through my feed, I don't harass people. I don't demean women. I don't go out of my way to make people's lives miserable. I do call out some garbage that I see it every once in a while, but I'm not like a... So that was when I went, okay, you guys are nuts. Everybody's nuts. And this went around, and a bunch of journalists put me on a list, and then eventually it got turned out that the list was utter garbage, and they took it off. But it was just like, what? How did something like that even happen? How do you guys call yourself adults and try to put yourselves up as like some sort of beacons of whatever? Like the journalists throughout this whole thing have been trying to put up this persona of, well, the GamerGate people are the ones that are the horrible nasties, and we're not. And then they just go say, and we're not generalizing people, if this doesn't apply to you, it doesn't apply to you, but then they'll just block people for like no reason. I mean, what is going on? So that was kind of where there was a turning point to me where I'm like, no, this isn't just a one-sided thing. This is this is an issue with people on both sides of the track here. And I wish I could say I saw it coming to some sort of conclusion, but I just don't. I don't see maturity coming in writing. I don't see maturity coming in comments, and I don't see maturity coming from anybody on Twitter either.
Well, and real quick to wrap up, because I think, like, I can kind of understand where the game's writers are coming from, because, when you have anonymous people, telling you, to eat shit and die, or, go commit suicide because, you gave Uncharted 2 like a 4.5 out of 5, or things of that nature. You get enough of that, and you start. It's almost like an open wound where you're kind of constantly guarding against it, and you just start to perceive attacks when there are none. But even so, I have noticed that it's the journalists that seem to keep this thing rolling. Mm-hmm. Where it's like I've noticed a lot of people like that aren't journalists kind of petering out on this stuff, but then I see certain writers that are still hammering, their point home or whatever. And it's like, guys, like, I follow you because you talk about video games. Mm-hmm. You haven't talked about video games in ever so long. And it kind of makes me want to just burn it all down and unfollow everybody related to video games whatsoever, and I don't know, just start tweeting about wrestling.
Yeah, it has simmered down, thankfully. It seems to have anyway, at least on my feed, but I also haven't been on Twitter in a little while, so maybe it hasn't. I don't know. But I knew for a while there I couldn't even say something without using a tag, without getting... I tweeted something at a game journalist. It was just a question, and I think you saw that because I started getting really, really furious with anti-GamerGate people started jumping into my mentions, accusing me of being part of some horrible movement and this, that, or the other thing. And I'm like, I just asked somebody a question about an article they wrote.
Right.
Where are you coming from?
And I do think that they're very reactionary, and part of that probably comes from the crap they deal with just, from the comments they get. But, like, a good example is a couple years ago when Rob was still on the show, there was some controversy going on, and I think it was between Lee Alexander and Jen Frank they were kind of talking.
Gosh.
And Rob, like, asked something, and he punctuated it with LOL, because Rob punctuates things with LOL all the time, and they jumped all over him for using LOL, and they're like, this isn't a laughing matter, what are you doing? And he's like, just making conversation, ladies, like, LOL, because that's what Rob does.
And she didn't help either, because...
Well, we can just...
Yeah, she's not helping. Okay, we're done. Lee Alexander is still not helping.
We could probably do a whole episode on this, but I don't want to.
I don't want to either. I think I would really like to leave it here. Guys, hey guys, do me a favor. Stop so we can leave it here, please.
Yeah, let's talk about video games again.
And how awesome they are, and how Hyrule Warriors is coming out soon, and everybody's excited to play it, and I don't know, let's go on.
All you have to do is believe. And Angelo, I believe in you and your hosting skills will carry us through to the rest of this episode because this is your baby. So take it away, and I can kind of let my pipes rest for a little bit.
Good, because I've been spending mine too. But so the ESRB guys, they are the people that are more or less responsible for putting rating labels on the games we play, so that people can make educated decisions about what they're buying. Because certain people don't want to buy certain games with certain kind of content in it, and that makes sense. As a person with 2 children in his household, I am pretty selective about what they see and what they play. And Call of Duty isn't happening here because my kids are frankly not ready. But there's other games that I don't have a problem with them watching Halo. I've played Halo in front of them. I don't see a problem with that. But like, Call of Duty is a whole other thing because it's people. It's a little more. I think it's a little too much for them, and that's an educated decision that I made as a parent. It's something that I actually discuss with my wife whenever I have a question about it. Like, do you think this is okay for them to see? Yes or no? Do you think this is okay for them to play? And I will be honest that thus far that has been a helpful thing. But we're kind of not the norm as far as the people that are here in this podcast, in that we have a lot more exposure to games than the average person does. I think the average person rolling into a GameStop might not know exactly what is in the game that they've picked up, and might not know, whether it's appropriate or even care. That's a whole other thing we can talk about. But
yeah, that's the nail on the head. But go on.
Yeah, but the whole thing is, so I think we all, hopefully anybody listening to this podcast that deep into the video game scene will know that it came a lot out of, the controversy in the 90s surrounded by like Night Trap and Mortal Kombat and its ilk, where basically the government said, listen, you guys start regulating yourselves or we're going to do it for you.
And to be fair, like Sega had actually already started doing that on their own before all that kerfluffle happened.
Actually, one of the pioneers was 3DO, which really surprised me. They set up a ratings board real early. I think almost immediately after all this stuff, as soon as they could. And I mean, obviously, I didn't last because it was 3DO, but they were kind of like this weird, in a weird way, like pioneers of this whole thing. Hold on one second, guys. I'll be right back. 1 second. Sorry.
Kids, am I right? Womp womp.
Kind of.
Hey, are you really taking a break? Because I could use a drink of water really bad. So.
Yeah, 2 minutes. We're all here?
Yes.
So basically what I wanted to talk of is we have enough sense to, if my kid is asking about a video game, the first thing I do is go online and Google the video game, and I read reviews on it, and I because first of all, I don't want them to bring home a turd, and sometimes they do anyway. I could share you some stories about times where my oldest has been like, no, but I really want it, okay, buy it, and then he brings it home and plays it for 10 minutes, and I said, I told you it was hot garbage.
I mean, that's how you learn, though. I mean,
yeah. Well, he's had to learn about 3 times now with spending his own money, and anyway.
Everybody had to have their Time Lord by LJN.
Oh. But for people not like us, like for the parent who's in GameStop with their 8-year-old who wants to play Saints Row because all his friends are begging, telling him how awesome it is it effective for her to take the box, flip it over? Is she going to get enough of a picture to know, hey, this is a game where you can beat someone up with a dildo? Maybe not appropriate for a child.
That's in Time Lord?
No, that's in Time Lord would be. Anyway,
playing Time Lord just makes you feel like you're being beaten over the head with a dildo.
Oh, okay. I don't know what that feels like, Julian.
I'll tell you some stories.
Yeah. And is it fair? I mean, do we feel it's fair? I mean, in one way, we're going to end up doing the inadvertent comparison to movies. I feel like I did watch a documentary on how movies are rated and that process and what it does, but I know if a movie gets an NC-17 rating, that's borderline kiss of death. But if a video game gets an AO rating, it's never going to see the light of day. I mean, nobody puts that on the shelf. Nobody talks about them. The advertising would have to be ridiculous to even make people aware of it.
And I mean, there's never been a actual like AO rated game from a major publisher. Like the only AO rated games have been like, Japanese import like erotic dating sims and stuff like that. Like, I mean, they're straight up not an AO rated game, except if you want to call like the recalled versions of GTA San Andreas. But I feel that was overkill. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, what's funny is there are a bunch of games that were given AO ratings, and then just like with movies, they have a process where they can edit it and then resubmit it. And then they were, reduced back to a lower rating.
Well, yeah, I mean stuff that actually like got released. I mean, you're not going to see something from EA or Ubisoft that has an AO sticker on it because there's no one's going to carry it.
Yeah. Manhunt 2, for example, got an AO rating, and they had to do a bunch of stuff to reduce it down to M. I think another one was, what was it? It began with a P. It was a comic. Punisher. Punisher originally got an AO rating. I think that was based on the comic book.
Guys, you know that this is actually the very day in 1994 that the ESRB started to certify games.
No kidding.
Yeah.
How did I miss that?
It was meant to be.
I
Yep.
guess.
This is
Happy
an
anniversary,
show.
defunct K3A.
Yeah.
Oh, I miss K through A.
Do we feel like it's a form of censorship? I mean, do we feel like there's a lot of stuff we could talk about this? So I suppose we could just start with how effective do we think it is, both for us and for other people. I kind of already discussed mine, so why don't we start with Julian, since he's normally the host?
Well, I will say that I think that the games rating system is extremely effective if people actually would pay attention to it. My history, in 8 years of retail is that a lot of parents just don't care or they don't take the time to look. But, and it's funny you brought that up, Angelo, and I don't want to spend too much time comparing like the video game ratings to movie ratings, but I do feel that when it comes to the actual descriptors on the box, games are a lot more cut and dry. This is what's in the game. And that there it is, where I feel like movie descriptors kind of make you more hyped about the movie with the stuff. So here I have a video game that is rated M, and it is rated M for blood and gore, drug reference, mature humor, nudity, strong language, strong sexual content, and violence. And that would be South Park: The Stick of Truth. And I think that tells you right there it's a pretty bad game for your kids, and that's really cut and dry. Now, and this is, and now I have a rated R film that really makes me jazzed to watch this movie, even though, I don't know how I could be more jazzed because I love this movie so much. But this movie is rated R for frenetic, strong, bloody violence throughout, crude and graphic sexual content, nudity, and pervasive language. And that would be Crank 2, starring Jason Statham, people.
Nice.
Did you like that one, tough guy? How freaking awesome was that, huh?
And that just makes this movie sound like the best thing ever. So, I don't know if but it also doesn't really tell me anything about the content.
The language is also kind of leading in yours. Like, it almost, to be honest, if somebody said that was a porno, I would probably believe them.
Sure,
based on that description.
There's also weird things when it comes to movie ratings where they can make up, because as we saw in This Film Is Not Yet Rated, you can kind of make up what gets the rating. So it's a lot more concrete in games, sort of, because it's like, okay, if there's alcohol or tobacco use, it's going to get a T right away. You know what I mean? So there's sort of like things that they establish that way. Whereas there's stuff like, people laugh, but like Twister, and I'm looking at it right now, rated PG-13 for intense depiction of weather. Okay? That's something that takes place outdoors, and you would say like the outdoors is like rated PG-13. Like a kid shouldn't see a storm cloud, but it's all arbitrary. It's like they watched Twister and they went, oh, we felt like this isn't for kids. Well, why? Well, because it's got intense scenes of weather. Okay, we'll put that on the poster, It's just, and the other thing too is like in movies, like it's much more of a marketing tool, because if you notice, like the PG rating is totally dead. Like when was the last time a movie that you can think of off the top of your head was PG that wasn't animated?
Galaxy Quest.
Was Galaxy Quest PG?
Yeah, because it's a very fun one for me, because it was clearly a PG-13 movie, and then they cut certain things to make it.
Oh, I know there's
PG.
there's a really bad dubbed F line in that film. But yeah, it's like the PG rating is all but dead. And that's like a marketing thing. Like they want the films to have PG-13s because that's wide net. They want to cast that net as wide as possible, and that's the trick, because they think teens won't go see movies that are rated PG. And we haven't gotten there with the gaming industry. What I find from games is that there's still a lot of parents that are like completely uninformed. And Julian, I know you saw this when we worked at Game Fellows, where people thought that the rating meant age appropriateness in regards to difficulty.
Right.
And people would bring back games that were like, they would be like, well, it said E, but they can barely play it. Or it said E, but they can't read, and it's like, well, that's not what it means. Like, it doesn't mean that everyone has the ability to play it. It means the content inside is for everyone.
It means that they can't read, and maybe you should do a little bit more.
But and to me, it was like there's always been. I mean, and that was like 10 years ago, and there was still education problems, and that's 10 years after the ratings introduced. You know, I think people are much more informed with the film's rating as to what the content's going to be versus a game rating, which I think is still really nebulous. Because the other thing too is like the kid at our house, he wasn't allowed to play M-rated games until this year. This is my girlfriend's son, and he's 12, just turned 13. And the advantage to having me as in the home is sort of getting to help decide what M-rated games are acceptable and which ones aren't. And a lot of it has to do, to me anyways, like what I put the limits on is the violence. One is language is sort of out of the question because he doesn't know, he hasn't been able himself to exercise when certain language is appropriate or not. So that's sort of out of the question. Mm-hmm. But to me, it's like, is the actions, are imitatable actions glamorized? So for instance, Skyrim has bodily dismemberment, but no language. But if you get in a intense sword fight, you can lop somebody's head off or their arms off or whatever. Now, the chances of him getting in an intense sword fight in a snowy field are very they're lessened. Do you know what I mean? They're not. The chances of that happening are much less than like him getting his hands on a gun or a knife in like a Grand Theft Auto kind of a situation or whatever, where I feel like it's that kind of real world violence is a little more glamorized. Or like the Halo games. I know there's some of those are rated M, but to me it's like you're shooting aliens, and yeah, it's M for blood. And the blood is like purple and green and stuff like that. It's
fluid, yeah.
I never understood why Halo was rated M. That boggled my mind from day one. Because to me, the violence was no worse than GoldenEye because it was like the same type of blood where it was like, well, it's sort of this like diffused texture that only appears in this very small area on an enemy and you don't even notice it. Like it's almost like playing paintball.
I personally would rather him hack through crowds of aliens with a Gatling gun and have pink blood splatter and guts fly everywhere than have him play a bloodless game in which he's a sniper and shooting people in the head.
Yeah.
That's T-rated. I mean, like, I think Medal of Honor, Call of Duty, some of those have had T ratings. And it's like, to me, that's a much more violent act. It's an act against a fellow man in a situation that can happen in modern day. And that's tougher for me to reconcile than, you know, like I said, the dismemberment in Skyrim or, you know, playing an Aliens game or whatever, where the violence is just doesn't apply. It's M-rated, but it's fantasy violence. And to me, there's just a big disconnect between the two.
Yeah, the first 3 ESRB rated games for Call of Duty were actually teen, and after that they were changed to M. And like while researching this topic, I actually found a lot of different games that like had started E and became teen, or had started teen and turned into M, or started M even and turned into AO, like is the case with San Andreas and the hot coffee thing. Even though the PC game that also has the hot coffee is still M and didn't turn to AO. But I think like the biggest outlier is actually like the Smash Brothers series, because the first one was like E, and then after that like they changed it to teen because of like mild violence. But seriously, like all those characters are in E-rated games, and it's like crazy that when they all fight they have to be, you know, teen instead of E, because a lot of the kids would eventually be playing that game. But there's such weird rules in games, like how the Zone of the Enders series was rated M because the demo of Metal Gear Solid was included in it. But then like why is the second one M?
One of the things I discovered too was the Burnout games. If you ever look at them carefully, there's never any drivers in the cars. Now, they usually have the windows tinted or shaded, so you can't really make that out, but that's actually a ratings thing. By removing the drivers from the cars, they are able to hit their target rating. And it's the same idea with, like, I have zero problem with my kids playing a game where they are a ship shooting down, like, other ships. Because for some reason, you don't associate that with the fact that there is a person inside that jet that he just shot down. You're not even thinking about that. You're just thinking about I'm a jet and I just shot another jet with a rocket.
Yeah.
And that's okay because it's not it's not me looking somebody else in the eyes and then pulling the trigger, which is what you have to do in these like military first-person shooter games. It's disconnected enough where it's ambiguous, and I don't feel nearly as impactful, even though you're kind of still doing the same thing if you follow it all the way down.
Well, I mean, if by that logic, I mean, if you're playing like Aerobiz for Super Nintendo, where it's a air traffic sim, and you accidentally cause like a Boeing 747 to crash, I mean, that should be an M-rated game because you just murdered like 300 innocent passengers. But I mean, that's just silly.
I'm not saying it should be. I just
think
it's
but
funny that we process things that way, and it does carry on. I think it carries on appropriately in the rating system. It just was kind of a side note.
Well, but I was just going to say, Patrick, real quick, you bring up a good point, because I do believe that the games rating system is a lot stricter than the movie rating system. This is a perfect example that I used to love to give people back in the Game Fellas days, because we would have a good dialogue with parents and stuff. Then they would ask us about these games, and I said, well, one thing to keep in mind is that video game ratings are a lot stricter. For example, Spyro the Dragon roasts his enemies with flame breath, and it's an E-rated game. Ratchet from Ratchet & Clank has a flamethrower that fires from a gun that he uses on robots, and it's a T-rated game. But it's like the same level of cartoon violence. It's just the way that it's displayed is different. So it's automatically like a T-rated game because it's a gun instead of like a cute little dragon spewing fire. But it's the same action that you're doing.
Yeah, that happened even in like the Zelda series with Twilight Princess, which is like the only one that's rated teen, and it's like also got like this darker animated blood, while like the other stuff, like they don't have blood in other games really that I know of. It's like poofs of smoke and stuff. So they brought that one up to teen, which is really surprising. And also, I didn't really play these games, but like I'm really surprised to see that Phoenix Wright was turned into an M-rated game in like its most recent incarnation, because it's like got violence, blood, suggestive themes, and language. But like all the other games are pretty similar, as I understand it. So like, it's just like these little things that people in the ESRB find that bump it up to an M rating for no reason, it seems like to me. But like because of their strict rules, that will change the entire series.
Well, here's what's funny about how they rate things is they don't play the games and then rate them. They're given a DVD and basically a series of photos and descriptions of what's going on, and the DVD contains like a bunch of moments in the game that people might find offensive, with like probably some explanation of what's going on and why it's there and what it's doing. They'll get pictures of certain things. They'll just get all that kind of stuff, and they have to more or less piece together what the game is. They will actually issue a fine if there's something in the game that you try to sneak in, or that a publisher will try to sneak in, or a developer that they didn't give them for review. They'll actually like get a $1 million fine out of them, which is pretty significant. So they're pretty serious about that stuff. But they also get review copies once the game is final. But by then they can't really, that's more of a check, I suppose, to make sure that everything's all right. Also, for downloadable titles, the review process is actually automated to an extent where literally the developer will get a checklist, and he checks this. It's all just checked off, and then it spits out a rating and a descriptor, and then their game is certified, which is kind of crazy.
It kind of leads me to one thing that because I'm pretty pro ESRB, but I do think that it's got some flaws, and I think one of them is that it seems that the popularity of the game kind of dictates how much attention they pay to it.
Yeah.
Like I will bring up, okay, so like obviously in the PS2 era, like Grand Theft Auto, those games were like the big thing, and like holy crap, like we need to really like get on this people because this is poisoning our children, blah blah blah. But those games were always obviously marketed towards adults, and I think they were very upfront with their messaging on those games. But then you had something come out like Narc, which came out at the very kid-friendly $19.99 price point, and it was very cartoony style graphics, and it looked like, oh, it's just a cop game, but like you're totally like using drugs as power-ups in that game, which I think is one of the worst things that you could have if you're talking about imitatable behavior. But, nobody cared because nobody bought Narc, so it didn't matter.
Right. One of the criticisms that's often levied against the ESRB and pretty much any of these ratings things is that it's a form of censorship. And part of that argument is that the AO rating is essentially the kiss of death. So if something goes beyond what somebody is willing to publish, they just say, oh, it's AO, so there you go, there's your rating, unless you take out this stuff that we don't want in it. So I almost feel like I'm letting the cat out of the bag by saying what I'm about to say, but I am just going to come right out and say it, is that I think as it is right now, I don't know if there maybe needs to be another thing that exists, because if it's a straight up porn game, it needs to be marketed as such. But some of this, marked as such. But some of these other things that were AO and then toned down, may have. Well, they're all pretty gratuitous. Like I mentioned Manhunt 2, but does that mean they shouldn't necessarily be available? I don't know about that. The only thing is that I think now with digital distribution taking over, that's almost going to be a non-factor, because if something gets an AO rating, okay, well, we'll just put it online. You can download it off the website, play it on your computer. And there's actually been it's funny because we saw this ad on our site. There was a game called Wartune. That part of the advertising material was a very, very prominent displayed adults-only rating on it. And the funny thing is the ESRB told them they had to take that out because it was never actually run by the board. So they just use that as marketing. And be like, hey, we're extreme. In this case, we're really sexy, and you should play our game. I don't know. That's kind of where I'm falling on it. I think it's. I think the fact that they aren't available at all is sort of a form of censorship. Not that I necessarily want to go out and buy them. But I don't know. What's the point of a rating if it just means that this game will never see the light of day? You know what I mean? Thoughts?
I mean, I guess I don't want to get into a whole big, our game's art, because I think, I don't think we're at that point with a lot of games where, this is the true message of the creator and you're impeding it because of your adults only rating and nobody's going to see it. I mean, most of these games are created by large groups of people trying to make large sums of money. So I think they're okay with some of that stuff. I think my thing is that in rare circumstances, if it's a very creator-driven thing, like maybe Quantic Dreams games where David Cage, the director, he's a very strong creative force in those games, and so I would feel bad if some of the content of his games got took out. But also I think, it's only the kiss of death because publishers, there hasn't been anybody brave enough to buck that. John, you would say movies, they say NC-17 is the kiss of death, but there are definitely directors and movie producers that have said, no, this needs to be NC-17, we're just going to take it. And
nowadays it's unrated.
Right.
Because of VOD, you don't even have to mess with it at all. The NC-17 rating is basically dead. They just don't have to mess with it. If somebody comes back to them and they say you're getting an R, what does it matter? They're not playing theaters anyways. So they'll just and with theaters with DRMs and stuff like that, and they'll play unrated stuff. It's kind of weird because they never had a problem with unrated. They've only ever had a problem with NC-17. So they've bypassed that altogether by just by doing the unrated stuff. And it's not. The equivalent would be if these games now. I don't know. Indie games aren't unrated, right? They still have to go through the same submittal process, correct?
If they're trying to get on one of the big platforms, but if they want to just release it on the PC, it's whatever they want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
If you go on the Amazon App Store or if you go on the Apple Store, both of those have, or not Amazon. I'm not so sure about the Google one, but I know Apple has their own ratings process. They don't have to submit through the ESRB.
Yeah, the problem with getting an AO rating in movies is you can't actually advertise your movie then. You can't have a TV spot. It won't like it's not allowed to be published or advertised on like a lot of channels or all of them, I think. I was like listening to Kevin Smith on the subject in the movie This Film Has Not Yet Been Rated, which he wanted us to watch, Angelo. And he and a lot of other people just had to recut their movie after the board says that it's an AO rating because the film, director or the director of the film being made, whatever you want to call them, like the CEO of Warner Brothers or wherever it is, would not let them have it come out. And, they don't really want it to come out that way either because it's like the kiss of death, like you just said. But they don't really know who's giving these ratings or anything, like who they can talk to, change the fact that violence is held in lower regard than sex on the term of AO, because if you have sex or like if you show pubes, it's a NC-17, it has to be recut basically. But if you kill hundreds of people in a movie, it's okay.
Yeah, there's definitely still that or I don't know, like gulf between the two, one is definitely a bigger sore spot than the other, and that's the thing, it's like games like they haven't gone there. Like I guess I have to say my piece about the hot coffee thing from San Andreas because oh man, like
go ahead, we just go there.
Them having to pull that from the shelves and put an AO sticker on the ones that were still on the shelves was such crap. Mm-hmm. Because we're talking about a gameplay implementation that wasn't finished, didn't work. Rockstar was like, no, we're not going to use this, but the bits of code were still floating around on the disk because that's what happens in game development. And, so somebody finds it on the disk because they cracked it because people are crazy and they like to get into the assets of games. And they're like, oh, hey, here's this mini game, but to get to it, you have to do all of these things in order to get to it. And then when you finally do, it's two clothed people dry humping because we're talking about PlayStation 2 era graphics. So, yeah, it was all this kerfluffle over really nothing. And it made me so angry when it was happening.
So the thing is it's like, all right. So when they submitted that to the ESRB, they basically didn't talk about the hot coffee content because it wasn't accessible content. The only way to access that content is to basically hack the game to get to it, like you were saying.
It was literally like, pieces from like the cutting room floor that were still floating around that people stitched back together. And
anybody who's done programming knows it's very, very simple to just take a line of code, leave it in the game, but just mark it so that the game doesn't use it. It's so easy to do. And a lot of people do that because if they ever want to come back to it and say, oh, you know what, maybe that was a good idea, it's still there. They haven't deleted it completely. It makes, or they could use it for something else. The argument or the side that I come from says that's inaccessible content. You have to hack the game to get at it. You didn't buy, that's like if somebody tells you, oh, go online and do this, 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 and this, and you can see this. You just happen to have this disk in order to do it. It didn't make any sense to me. And I don't have a problem with even the ESRB setting the standard of if it's on the disk, it has to be included, except that they hadn't set that precedent yet. So that's kind of like, and I hate to use this, well, I don't hate to use this example because it was something that drove me nuts as a teen. But when my parents would all of a sudden kind of create a new rule about something that I had already done that was wrong, and then immediately punish me for it, I'm like, wait, you didn't tell me I shouldn't do that before. Now you're telling me I shouldn't do it, and you're punishing me for already doing it?
Yeah. Well, and going back to the whole popularity thing also, I think it was the same year that Leisure Suit Larry Magna Cum Laude came out as a San Andreas, and that game has full-on banging, and it's rated M, but nobody cared because only I bought Leisure Suit Larry Magna Cum Laude, so it didn't matter.
Well, part of it too was there was a lot of people bringing a lot of heat to it.
Right.
Above that, Leland Yee was one of them. I don't know if you remember that. His name popped up a lot when I was doing this research as a really, really outspoken, loud, obnoxious, we need to do something about all these games, and then he gets busted for smuggling guns. So.
Oh yeah, well he's like part of the holy trinity of people trying to get games like shut down. It's like Jack Thompson is the top, and then I forget the senator. He was actually there back in the original hearings. Really boring guy, been around forever. But then Leland Lee is like the most recent one.
Yeah, actually Hillary Clinton got involved, and Joe Lieberman as well.
Lieberman, that's the one. Yeah,
Lieberman
was the one.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, with that stuff, like, it's a weird thing because like the Jack Thompson stuff, and I'm glad he's been disbarred and like he hasn't been around in years because he was a total blowhard. But if his agenda was to help keep M-rated games out of like minors' hands that aren't ready for that material, that's fine. But the way that he tried to vilify the entire industry as this like terrible corruptive force that was like trying to drag down the youth of America, like it's like, no, you sound like a crazy conspiracy theorist, and I can't take you seriously.
And Yee was the same way. Leland Yee was trying to push through a bill at one point that would take all M-rated games. It said you had to take all the M-rated games and put them on a separate shelf, and that shelf had to be above 5 feet off the ground, and like it had to be clearly marked that this was the M-rated section of the store, like the dark back room in a video rental store or something, And by the time, and that bill actually got passed, but by the time it was done, it was so watered down that all it actually made happen was that people had to put, near the M-rated section, they had to put a sign explaining what the ratings were and how they worked. That was all that happened from that bill.
Which really should have been done anyway.
Yeah,
But I mean, a bill like that would basically say that video games are like porn, and like I said before, like you're not going to find anything in a video game that's anything like porn I mean, the stuff in Game of Thrones is so far and above anything that I've ever seen in a video game, and everybody loves Game of Thrones, so.
Another example of the system kind of failing actually happened with the Elder Scrolls Oblivion. I don't know if you guys remember that. But basically what happened was they changed the rating on that as well from T to M, which obviously isn't nearly as bad as changing it from M to AO. But the reason is that when the final product came out, the depictions of blood and gore were, in their opinion, more graphic than they were represented to them. But I think what their biggest gripe was almost immediately when it came out on the PC version was there was a mod, which I'm surprised that they hadn't seen this before, but surprised somebody made a nudie mod for it, right? Because that doesn't happen with every PC game ever that comes out. So they apparently bumped it up because you could go online and download a mod that somebody else made to plug into the game that would make the characters naked. They have not done that since. I think they realized after they did that how ridiculous it was. But I mean, it just kind of, it almost makes me wonder if when they first started doing this, they were a little clueless about how video games actually worked.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think, and the problem is that, when a lot of these bills get introduced is that they're being introduced by people who clearly have no idea what video games are.
Yeah. And
it's my hope that, I mean, it's kind of a different topic, but as far as like them trying to ban video games outright or stuff like that, like it's my hope that 20 years from now, that's not going to be an issue anymore, because by that point, video games will have been around for, 70 years. So, that should do it. Like, that should let everybody die off that didn't grow up with video games.
I guess, does anyone else have anything else they wanted to say on this? I had one more thing, but we're kind of getting to the end already. And it's just, how do you think, is there a way that you think the system can improve? And if so, how would you improve it?
Well, let me ask, like, just to everybody, but especially John, since we have like a bona fide film critic.
Yeah.
How helpful would it be if they just went ahead and adopted the MPAA ratings?
Yeah, that's just to keep everything universal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It would be helpful, but I think that they would need to, I think the whole thing would sort of have to change, because you're essentially like talking about all these individual pieces that you can only affix four ratings to. So you're saying G, PG, PG-13, or R, and then you have to quantify morality in a way. So it's like you have to decide, are you going to start counting cuss words? If I say the F word one time, but let's say I say shit 4,000 times in one film, one is going to give a much dirtier impression than the other one. You know what I mean?
And also at that point, you're an Adam Sandler movie.
So everything would kind of have to be like modulated, where it's like they'd have to start counting things, and they kind of do when it comes to like they get weird about like gore and things like that. So they'll be like, oh, we had to cut 2 seconds of gore. Now, logically, okay, just person to person, let's say I'm watching a movie and somebody's head gets cut off and blood sprays out of the stump, and it lasts for 5 seconds, but it's cut at 3 seconds, and that's what gets them the R. Well, I already saw the head get cut off, and I already saw the blood spray out, and my device has a rewind button on it. So I could watch that over and over and over again if I wanted. So what is the difference in those 2 seconds? You know, that's a broken system. It's like Walmart's parental advisory on music that has language. They won't carry it, but they carry R-rated movies, you know? And I could rewind the F word in an R-rated movie and hear the F word more than I would in one album. Do you know what I mean? It's just the system is all busted, and I think personally, instead of seeing it try to implement like the ESRB, I would see it as, I think that parental controls should be for the content that they want and don't want. Games are going to get there eventually because of the way that technology is moving. Movies, you could already do this, where basically so many people now, I mean, rental's all but dead. So home video is huge, and movies and movie theaters are huge. But being able to say, here is the content that is in this. It has X, Y, and Z. And as a parent, instead of filtering and going, I don't let my kids watch any R-rated films, well, that means they can't watch Glory. That means they can't watch Gladiator. You know what I mean?
Right.
And then you have to go, okay, well, then let me do this. I'm going to turn off rape. I'm going to adjust the F word filter to only allow one in, or maybe I'll turn the F word filter off. You know what I mean? And go in and let the parent define what they allow the kids to see and not see, and then have the streaming services and the services that we use feedback those results, so that you're turning all the control over to the parents, and the parents can then go, I'm either giving full access, or I can go in and go, okay, this is labeled as it has these 6 ingredients. I'm going to turn 4 of these ingredients off, and certain things will get through that label and certain things won't.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really good. I think, games can get even more granular just on, like, the actual development level.
Oh, yeah. In the development level, then you can say, like, even if it is an M-rated game and it's M because of language and M because of, blood or whatever, essentially, like, I mean, we're all used to the switch that's like, oh, turn blood on and off. It's like, why not turn language on and off, where the word is just substituted or it's bleeped out. You know what I mean? It's a different audio track, things like that. I mean, that's all technology that's right there. It's totally available. And I don't feel like anybody's using it. Nobody's giving the power to the parents.
It's funny you mentioned that. It was kind of a quick anecdotal story, but my father, when we were kids, if there was a movie he really wanted us to watch, but it was he used to love good historical war movies, but as good historical war movies are, they can often contain stuff that maybe a kid shouldn't be watching. He would actually go through using the camcorder to play the tape, to record it to the VCR, and then he would actually cut out manually the stuff he didn't want us to see or hear. Just friggin' great.
You need to watch the documentary Clean Flicks, because that's kind of what that was, and it's really good.
And he wouldn't do everything. He would just be like, well, they're not ready to see this yet, so I'll cut this out. That kind of thing.
Right.
I thought it was really cool.
Well, yeah, definitely. And going back to what you were talking about, John, like, I think Brutal Legend did that really well. Like, actually in the game itself, where in the intro level, like, there's a part where, Jack Black's character is like, you stupid, idiotic mother! And then the game pauses, and it gives you a message that says, this game has naughty language, do you want to hear it, or do you think it's funnier with the bleeps? and then you can set it right there and then, like, if you want to hear all the language or not. And then, like, immediately after that, like, when you kill your first enemy, or no, it's not even that. It's like, I think, like, somebody dies, but it asks you,
make their
like,
heads explode. Like,
yeah, it's like,
yeah,
like, do you want to see all the gore, or, like, do you want us to cut away? And if you set, so then you choose right there, but it's done in a really funny, stylish way, and also, allows you to choose how you want to consume your media. Because there are people, like, I find it kind of weird, but, like, there are people who are really, like, mindful of that even as adults. Like, I know, like, the lead developer at Zboid Games who, created, like, Call of Cthulhu and Breath of Death 7, he really rails against M-rated games. Like, he went on a tirade when Tomb Raider came out, like saying that he wasn't going to play it because, Tomb Raider shouldn't be M-rated and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, oh, okay. Like, it's a really interesting stance to take, but, I guess I understand where you're coming from, so, maybe you would prefer if the game had sliders for you personally as well.
Yeah.
But, I don't want to, like, take over the show, but Patrick, like, you're a teacher, and, like, I know, like, you're a cool teacher, and, like, the kids know you're into games and stuff like that. So I'm sure there's a dialogue there. Like, do parents ever come and ask you about some of that stuff, or, like?
Yeah, I mean, even the head of the school has, like, a kid in my class, and he will come up and talk to me about what games he wants, and then he'll spin it one way, and I won't have said that, but then he'll somehow get Call of Duty, and then afterwards, she'll come over to me and be like, did you say he could get this game? Because I don't know about this. I was like, no, I said that it's a realistic version of, what would be realistic. It's a realistic version of war or something like that. I didn't say that it was something he should get, but I said it was better than the other option. Obviously, I'm talking Battlefield Call of Duty here.
Obviously. Well, also, like, one of them is completely broken and the other one is playable.
Yeah. So, like, sometimes I get stuff like that. A lot of my parents are more concerned with, like, if the kids are playing something that will teach them. So, like, I'll mention something on the system that they don't have that will allow them to, like, create video games like Little Big Planet or something like that, instead of, mentioning a lot of, entertaining yet lacking in educational substance, because their parents are, really concerned about how they use their time pretty much all the time.
Right. And I do think that a lot of it, like, it's dependent on the kid too, like what he or she is capable of handling, because, kids develop at different rates. Like, John, when we were at Game Fellas, there was this kid named Jason who, he was kind of like our little buddy. Like, his dad worked in the mall also, and he would hang out at the store all the time. He was a real mature kid, and, I mean, he was playing, games way above his pay grade when he was pretty young, but he was also really well adjusted, and he could handle that stuff really well, and we didn't have any problems, like, letting him play, like, the, harder games in our store. But then I think about, like, my cousin Tony's son, who, the last time I saw him, I was like, this kid has no grasp of, like, reality versus fantasy. And it's really kind of scary to me right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you have to know the kid in order to know what's appropriate for him. Like, I mean, I think it just goes, there's certain things that some of my kids can't handle, not, just because they just aren't there yet. You can't necessarily control how they develop and what they're ready for at a particular age. It just sort of is how they are,
And sometimes you have to, like, let the parents know that they've been binging a little bit too much. If you see them, like, the next day, like, pretending like they're in a video game, or putting out fake blasters, or pretending that they're flying something in class a little bit more than normal, which is,
like, well, sometimes kids just want to act out what they do. I mean, when I was a kid, I pretended I was video game characters all the time. I think that's kind of normal, I guess.
Oh, yeah, but if they start doing it, like, in the middle of their work cycles out of nowhere, it's a little bit interesting to, like, ask the parents, like, what were you guys doing last night? Like, were you letting them stay up past 10 o'clock? Seriously?
Yeah.
Patrick's like, I had to see a doctor about this stuff. Maybe your kids do, too.
Ooh, sore subject.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I'm kidding. But if you guys don't remember, yeah, I played a little bit too much Mega Man, and they thought something was wrong with me.
I remember that. So,
Yeah.
anyway, is there anything else we wanted to talk about the ESRB?
I guess real quick before we go, because it's kind of pertinent to like my situation. But John, you touched on it a little bit, but what is it? How is it coming into a situation where it ain't my baby, but you're still, in the situation now? Like, is it uncomfortable? Is there butting heads? Like,
it's a little weird. I know that one thing I would not have let him play, but because it was iOS, it's kind of weird because it comes down to educating the parents, because iOS games don't have necessarily, they have ratings sort of. They have like download things where it's like if you try to download it, it just asks you, hey, are you over 17? And you just say like, okay.
Right.
So he played The Walking Dead on his mom's phone. And there's no way. Like, The Walking Dead to me is like a very M-rated game, and one that I would feel like is inappropriate for him. I found a good ally in a website, an app called Kids Media. I use it for like basically it'll because a lot of times, like especially with the new games, I'm maybe not as educated as I used to be. And I use this Kids Media app, and I can just do a search, and it'll have reviews from parents that'll say, it's M-rated, but here's why it's M-rated, and I found it appropriate, or it's M-rated and it's M-rated for a reason, like that kind of stuff. It's tough because he's getting to an age where he wants to be playing like the older games, and it's tough. And I'm kind of looked at. I don't like being put in the position of the person who gets to decide whether or not that's the case. But so far, if he's wanted something that's been M-rated and has been inappropriate, it's sort of like he's been easily placated with a different M-rated game because he's still in the age and it's still new to him that he's just now getting to play them, that it's sort of like, oh, well, you will let me play. So then it doesn't become a matter of like, oh, you're banning me from M-rated games. You're just saying I can't play that one. And that seems to go down a little easier than just saying like a flat no to all M-rated games.
Right. And it is so, subjective. And again, it goes back to the child too. Like I've mentioned it a lot, but it's just because it's on my mind. But like Diablo 3 is something that if I had like a 12 or 13-year-old who was had a pretty good head on his or her shoulders, I would totally let them play. I mean, it's totally dripped in gore, but it's like, the camera is really zoomed far out and it's kind of cartoony graphics anyway. And there's really nothing else objectionable in the game. So,
Yeah. It's just
fine.
that last, maybe a little bit of the third act. No, not the third act. The third act's pretty light, but the last act has a lot of dark colors, I think. I don't like when you're going into the downward spiral and finally get to Diablo,
Yeah, but also the enemies kind of become like they're less turning into giblets and more like kind of disappearing into vapors of smoke by that point. Yeah, so it kind of evens out that way. But no, you're right. Like, it gets a little darker, but at the same time, like, I think certain cartoons on like Cartoon Network are probably just as violent that they're going to see at some point anyway. And at least if you're there with them to play, like, you can put some context to it.
Yeah. A little not so clear about Diablo, though. Did you get to tout your recent achievement?
I will be doing that next episode because I'm going to have a whole story about it.
Oh. Teaser.
I guess, I don't know, or is that good, Angelo?
Yeah, I think it's fine.
Are you satisfied?
Sure.
Are you entertained?
Are you not entertained?
For an M rating, sure.
I hope the audience is.
Hmm.
Me too.
Are you? Audience, speak.
All right, Angelo, take us out.
We're done. Have a good night.
There's protocol here, sir.
Goodbye.
Well, thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed the show.
Tell them where they can find us.
They can find us at www.pixelbit.com, and it's spelled Pixl bit.com. I am online on Twitter as @arogisham, @arogisham. Do you want to give out Twitter handles real quick, Julian?
I'm @Julian_Titus.
Yep. Patrick?
I'm at some boss.
And John, if you want to give yours out.
I'm at Gholson, GHOLSON.
And various places on the interweb, which we talked
pretty much
about
everywhere. Are you Googleable now? Like if I just search John Gholson, am I going to find you and all your work?
Let's see what happens.
Damn well should by now.
Gholson.
Yeah.
And it comes up as, it's just Aqua Man porn. This is really weird. That's not what I expected at all.
Ride
this
that
isn't
seahorse.
Me.
There's the callback we were waiting for.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, I show up on there. It's a variety of stuff. I finally pushed the other John Gholson off the page. So
there was a John Gholson, really?
Yeah, there's a John Gholson that's an artist who went to school in Georgia and is a wannabe actor. And we share the same name, which makes it really difficult when people go to like johngholson.com, which is not what I'm plugging.
You need to meet this other John Gholson because you have so much in common too.
Yeah. I tried to get, when I was going to school in Georgia, I tried to get somebody to do like a short documentary of the two John Gholsons meeting, but I could never get it off the ground. So
that makes me sad. That would have been amazing.
Well, I suppose that's it.
I suppose so.
It's also amazing.
Yeah. And we thank you for joining us and hope you've enjoyed our discussion.
And what do they do, Angelo?
I don't know.
They keep it pantsless, damn it.
They keep it pantsless. Yes. Please to keep it pantsless, Internet.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
I'm not a virgin anymore. I just thought you should know.
Couldn't stick the landing.
No. It's not my landing to stick, man. It's yours.
In fact, I have been all over town. Down by the lake and underneath the table in my living room. Outside by the blue moon. You can call me what you will. Call me a slut, call me a jaded pill. Darling, I got your number now. I'm not a virgin anymore. Oh, I've been taken. I've been hung up, I get down and start it over again. I've been open. I've been closed like a book.
I am Arnold Schwarzenegger. I stay here. You will be back. Is there anyone? Anyone at all? God damn it. I'm talking to myself again. Yay?
Hello?
Maybe.
Aqua Man here.
Okay.
I've brought scallops. You should have heard what they said about you.